All right. Welcome to the show, Jimmy Rex.
Dude, thanks for having me, Nick.
This is huge. So, guys, Jimmy Rex, a little intro on him, okay? He is founder of We Are The They, okay? Keynote speaker around the world. How long you been speaking, dude?
I mean, I probably really started taking it serious about 7, 8 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Real estate team has sold over 5,000 homes. You were the number one agent. How long has it been?
About 5 years ago is when I hit number one in the state of Utah.
Okay. Can we ask what your gross commissions were then?
I made about 5.5 million that year.
Jeez, that's amazing. Okay.
Yeah.
And then you have a best-selling author. I saw you launch the new book. How many do you have now?
That was my third book. Yeah. So this last one was cool because we hit bestseller on the USA Today list and got, printed in the paper and the whole thing. But yeah, man, it's super proud of it. Yeah.
I love that. And then you're invested in 38 private companies. What kind of company? Like, do you do sales organizations? Like, what are?
Yeah, a little of everything. I mean, we got a couple of restaurants in Las Vegas, a couple things here. A lot of SaaS companies. I was an early investor in Nikola Motors and Entrada Software were a couple of the better ones that I invested in. The rest of them you probably haven't heard of because they either haven't had any kind of liquidation or either, are still trying to make it or whatever else.
So I want to hear a little bit of the story. We've got about 45, 50 minutes or so to rip. How long have you been, like, did you start out in sales? Like, what did your journey look like?
Yeah, I like a lot of people that you probably interview just because of our location. I did an LDS mission.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's the ultimate sales training, right? 2 years, Monterrey, Mexico. And I got home. It was funny. I actually just wanted to be like a waiter, but I wouldn't work on Sundays. And so I started looking at sales jobs and I answered an ad in the paper and it was selling steak and chicken door to door. And so I just thought this is worth giving it a shot. I remember the guy explained how we would make the money. This was before, even Vivint or Apex or any of those companies. Wow. Yeah, Pinnacle, they didn't exist back then. And so there was really nobody was going door to door. It was a very looked down upon profession. And the guy explained to me, basically, we get the case of meat for this price. You put a big freezer in the back of your truck and you go out every day, and anything over that price you get to keep. And I remember thinking, man, I could, make a couple $100 a day doing this. And my first day I ever went out, it was funny. The guy loaded me up with 6 cases of meat. Each case had like 58 cuts of steak. And he told me, he was like, hey, man, if you sell it all, call me, we'll get you some more. So I was just gung ho. I was just excited. I barely knew what I was doing, but I went out and I sold all 6 in like an hour and a half and made a couple $100 in that hour and a half. And I called him to get more steak. And he's like, we actually drove to Provo. I was up in Salt Lake. He's like, we actually drove to Provo. I guess go home for the rest of the day. He didn't think I'd sell it. Yeah. And so, but it really changed my whole life, man, because in that moment, when you're young, you want to have money, you want to be successful, you want to know that you're going to have a nice life, but you really don't know how that's going to happen or if even that's going to happen when you're a kid. And in that moment, my whole life changed because I knew my worst case scenario, I could make 300 grand a year selling steak and chicken door to door, which would be like probably making $500,000 today. Right.
Yeah.
And so it was like, it blew the possibilities open for me of like what I wanted to do with my life. And so I did that for the next couple of years, man. I ended up forming my own business. We had a funny little tagline. It was called, the name of our company was Nebraska Meat Network is what we called it, just to kind of play off the whole Omaha steak thing. But, and our subtitle was Nobody Beats Our Meat. I just thought that was funny, but we thought we were humorous. But yeah, so anyway, did that for a few years. And then my partner ended up stealing a bunch of money from me. And about that same time, I got my real estate license. And
you were how old at this time?
I was 24.
Okay.
The problem was with the door-to-door meat sales, and again, like if I was born a couple of years later, I would have just gone the route that most people around here went, into the traditional things that you sell. But so, I mean, you're just grinding every day, and it kind of just felt like a demeaning job to me at the time. And a lot of the other people in the industry were just pretty corrupt. Like one guy stole one of my vans and went off to Reno, Nevada, and we had like 3 or 4 dudes we had to drop off to get drug tested every day before they could hit their route. And that's who was selling, And so I ended up getting some pretty good sales guys because I would throw steak and chicken parties down in Provo and we would just throw barbecue. And, people in college are used to having hot dogs or hamburgers.
Yeah.
All of a sudden I'm serving steak, chicken and salmon, and everyone's like, what, who the hell is serving all these steaks? I mean, hundreds at a time. And they go, oh, Jimmy owns a meat company. And that's how I kind of would find my sales guys. And so anyway, so we ended up, I did that for a few years, like I said, but just got kind of over it. My partner stole a bunch of money, and it's a whole nother story. And so I jumped into real estate with like full force, got in 2006 was my first year as a real estate agent.
24, 25,
25, yeah. Or 24. Yeah, 24.
Okay.
And my first 6 months, it was kind of funny, man. I mean, I know you do sales training, and I'd never really had any formal training. I just was learning all this stuff on my own. There was no rule book or whatever. And people forget nowadays, if you want to learn how to be a realtor, I mean, it is an endless supply of information. If you want to learn how to do sales, there's a ton of companies like your own, But back then, I was literally reading books and answering ads in the back of the Realtor magazine to try to learn how to do real estate. And so my first 6 months, just completely failing. And I think I sold 3 homes in my first 6 months. I was about to get out of the industry,
which is still pretty decent for a start for most, but
I would say no, but yeah, I mean, I don't really compare myself to low averages. Yeah. So I don't know, but anyway. And so I was pretty, over it. I was just like, all right, I'm going to go back to school. And then I found this mentor. It was a flyer was just in my desk somehow. And there was a conference that was literally the next day. And it was like all the things I wanted to learn as a real estate agent. It was like, learn how to call for sell by owners, learn how to have a strong listing presentation, learn what to say to buyers. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is everything I've wanted to know. And so I went to the seminar. It was a 3-day seminar. And dude, I was pretty broke. I remember putting that on a credit card, and I was like, oh man, this is going to be a problem, But I had a deal that was going to close in like a month or so. And so anyway, I go to the seminar, and they gave us a homework assignment that night. And I went home and did it, and I got a lead, I'm like, man, this stuff works. And so then the next day, again, I'm sitting there and I'm learning all this stuff. Is amazing. They were talking about behavioral styles and, closing and just scripts and how to say things the right way, a lot of NLP and voice fluctuation. I'd never heard of any of that stuff. And so as they're teaching all this, I'm just like sucking it in. I'm like, this is great. And so I go home, do the homework assignment, get a couple more leads. And so I'm just like hooked on this now. Then the third day they pitched the coaching, right? And it was $1,000 a month. This is 2006. So I'm just like, oh my gosh, there's no way, like $1,000 a month. My mortgage on my place in Provo that I bought was like $950 a month. Jeez. And so I'm just thinking to myself, like, these people are nuts.
Yeah.
And, but I knew I had to do something. Like, if you want things to change, you got to change something. You want to do, you got to get around people that are doing much more than you. And so that was the first time I ever really invested in myself. I remember I filled the thing out, and I told the guy, I said, hey, if you try to run this card in the next month, it's going to bounce. But if you call my number, I wrote it on there, and I'll let you know when this deal closes, I'm in. And so they did. They let me do it. And my next 6 months, so my first 6 months as a realtor, I sold 3 houses. I finished that year. So the final 6 months, by the end of the year, I had 60 homes sold.
Look at that.
And it was so funny to me, because I remember when I was at that seminar, there was like a break, and all the people that were in the coaching had this lanyard on, and it said they were in coaching. And I started asking them, I was like, hey, does this stuff work? They're like, yeah, it all works. And I'm asking them, how many homes a year do you guys sell? Keep in mind, I've sold 3 at the time, right? And they're like, 20, 50, 40, 35. I'm like, shit, all right. And I asked them how much of it they do, and they're like 20%, 30%. And I remember thinking to myself, like, well, if it works, why don't you just do 100%?
Right.
Like, why don't you do it every day? And they kind of laughed at me like I was the idiot, right? They're like, well, it's just really hard. And so I remember I committed. I said, if I do this, I'm going to do this
all the way.
So when I signed up, dude, I'm telling you, I did not miss. I would research my scripts. And all my old roommates laugh about it, because I laminated my scripts and I put them in my shower. So 6:30 in the morning, dude, I'm chanting scripts. And then I knew how to say it. I'd practice them with other realtors. And then, dude, from 8 to 11, I was on the phones. Excuse me.
Okay.
Pretty much every single day, I had to make my 30 contacts a day. And when
was that a metric you set?
That's what the coaching kind of told me.
Cool.
Yeah. If you want to basically, like, look, if you want to get X amount of deals, this is the expectation. But it was interesting when I first started calling for sell by owners. That's who I was calling all day. I could get an appointment with like 1 out of 70. And by the time I quit doing that 5-6 years later, I'd get an appointment, maybe 1 out of 12. But it was awesome. I just go in every day, make my calls. If you make your calls from 8 to 11, you do the one thing, right? I saw you have that book.
Yeah.
If you do the one thing you need to do, then the rest of the day kind of takes care of itself. And so from 11 to 12, I was doing lead follow-up. 12 to 2, I was doing back-to-back lunch appointments. And then from 2 to 7 or 8 every night, I was on appointments. And then if I had the night open, I'd go network. And so I just was a machine, man. I did that for the next 5-6 years, and became, one of the, I very quickly became like the top agent in Utah County, and one of the top, 5 realtors in Utah for the next decade, basically.
Yeah.
Just literally running that system.
That's amazing. I remember you when I was at Aptiv. This was years back.
Mm.
You came and spoke to us. I was like, this guy's on it.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because people would come shadow me all the time. It was one of my favorite things, dude. And you probably experienced this yourself. People always want to like, okay, I'm going to see what this person does different, and then I'll know the secret, right?
Nothing.
And dude, they would come watch me and they'd shadow me, and they'd just get so bored. They'd always leave after like an hour or two. They're like,
yeah,
you're just getting your ass handed to you left and right. And I'm like, yeah, I don't care. Like if 30 people hang up on me, but one gives me an appointment, I won the day.
Yeah.
And I really had that attitude. I don't know if I'm just lucky that I really didn't care or whatever. Like that's just the way I was raised. Maybe I had tough mentors or whatever, but so every day to me was just a game, man. And, you know, it was funny, like, but every single realtor that would come watch me, they all just would say the same thing. They're like, and they'd be so disappointed because they wanted to see the, what does he say that I'm not?
Yeah,
that
exactly.
I can, as soon as I implement this, my business will take off.
Surely he's got this one crazy one.
Yeah, it's just a grind. You know. Well, it's funny. Years later, I started selling some solar. I did it for Vivint Solar. And when they first were guinea pigging the thing in 2014, and there was a realtor, his name was Reno Mendenhall, a solar guy named Reno Mendenhall. He was the number one guy in the whole company. And I knew I was going to quit doing it after a few months. I was going to go back and just be full-time real estate again. But before I went back, I had this genius idea. I was like, there's so many guys in this company that are brilliant, that are great salespeople. I want to go find out what they're all doing and see if I can learn from them. So I spent a month. Every day I'd shadow one of the top 30 guys in the company. I went and did this with all the top guys, Dan Dunn, and, you know, Reno and all these different guys. And it was so funny because I remember the first time I went with Reno was he was the number one guy. I had that expectation, like, all right, let's see what this dude does. Dude, if you were writing a movie, I know you do solar, so it's hilarious. If you were writing a movie of everything that go wrong on a day selling solar, that was the day with Reno. It was like he had a dog chase him. He had a guy run him out of his garage, like literally threatening him. He fell over like a fence. It was like had a cell fall through that was a slam dunk, and then the husband came home and killed it. Like everything that like can happen in sales. And we were in Huntington Beach, so I'm like, all right, dude. Like it was a Saturday. We started at like 9 a.m. It was like 6 p.m., dude, and we got nothing.
Yeah.
And he's just keeps going. And I'm over here like, man, can we call it a day or what? I'm ready to go to the beach, you know?
Yeah.
And finally, about 6 o'clock, dude, I'll be damn 6:30, he gets a cell.
Boom.
And I'm like, okay, now I can go home. He just keeps going. 7:30 gets another one. 9 o'clock gets the third one. Boom, he got his 3 that day. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. And it was just such a beautiful experience because he was not any better talent-wise than anybody else, but he had just pre-committed. I remember his wife texting him, and she was just taking the kids to the beach and taking them shopping and doing their thing that day. And he just knew his job was to make this, just like I did in real estate. And eventually he got the reward for doing it. And it's the number one thing I teach people in sales, especially, but in anything, it's really pretty simple. It's not easy, but it's very simple. You have to learn what to say. You learn how to say it so you sound great doing it. And then you literally just do it all day. Like you do it more than anybody else. And if you follow that formula, it's guaranteed you'll be a top salesperson. And so a guy like Reno, all he had that others didn't. And what I did in real estate was that I just didn't care. I wasn't focused on the outcome. If you look at sales as a funnel, right? You got like the top of the funnel is every action that you have. What can I put in the funnel? It's like baking a cake. What do I want to put in? But people focus on the bottom of the funnel, which is the result, what's coming out.
Yeah.
And when you're celebrating the win of the result,
you got a problem.
You do, because some days it's good and some days it's not. All I needed to do every single day, dude, I celebrated if I made my calls. I celebrated if I put in the hours. And if I did that, I won the day. And I never had to worry about the money. The money was just going to be there as long as I filled the funnel up every day.
Dude, let me just hit on this. For the solar industry, is booming right now, Jimmy, as you know. And they call it the solar coaster when guys are selling high and then have the lows. And I'm like, dude, I don't ride the solar coaster. That doesn't exist in my world. And it's because of this principle. You focus on the inputs, not the outputs. What are your controllables? Doors knocked, cold calls made. How many people did you pitch? That's number one. Output, how many sets did you get? How many sits? How many sales, right? And when you focus on the inputs, you're always winning because it's in your control. Talking to 30 people is 100% in our control. Where getting somebody to say yes, a little bit, but not always. And if you focus just on that, you can become manipulative. And so it eases the pressure off, and then it creates this consistency where, you're winning. And I feel like that positivity wins throughout the rejection.
Yeah. Well, and when the reality is like knocking doors can suck sometimes. Calling for sub owners is just, it's not fun, but and you can learn to really appreciate. Like I remember like when the market tanked, because I sold my second year, I sold 98 homes. And then, dude, my third, I thought I was God's gift to real estate, and I was not. I was a product of a great market. All of a sudden, the
That's
market
cool.
tanks, right? You probably remember just blood in the streets, dude. Like
Yeah.
couldn't have been worse. And we had to give you an idea, we have a 5.5 month supply of homes on the market right now. And people say it's just like this frozen market, nothing's happening.
Yeah.
We had a 22-month supply of homes on the market in 2008, 2009, to give you an idea. I mean, it was the average home took 22 months to sell.
And
that was listed.
Where are we at right now?
Of like 5.5.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was 4 times as hard to sell a home then as it is right now.
Yes.
And so anyways, my point of that is like, it's really hard when you've been making a lot of money. By the way, there's nothing worse. The only thing worse than not having money is when everyone thinks you have a lot of money, right? Because I was killing it for that year and a half, and then the market tanks, and I overexposed myself. I bought investments I shouldn't have. I had expenses I shouldn't have. I didn't know how to run a budget, so I was dead broke, dude.
Been there.
And you know, I had to tell my assistant to hold his check a few times, but I remember being just as happy during those times as I was any other time in my life, because I was really pushing hard. I was working my ass off. And there's a feeling at the end of a day, regardless of how the outcome is, if you know you just work your butt off for that day, you're going to feel good about yourself. And so I just worked my butt through that. I remember I had like a sign on the side of I had this like prospecting booth I made them build in my office for me. And every morning, that's where I went in. I closed the door. I had a stand-up desk, so I couldn't sit down.
Yeah.
I had a dial phone, so I didn't have my cell phone in there with me.
Smart.
And I had an iPod, and I would just put iPod music on, and then I would just
Crank.
freaking grind the phones, right? And I had a sign next to the phone. It said, because again, it's only so much fun if you're paying off bills and paying off debt. Like that's not very motivating to go knock doors or pick up the phone and call for sell by owners. And so there was a sign that said, show up today for your future self. You never know who's going to need you. And that was my motivation, man. I just said, like, I want to be somebody one day. I'm going to change lives. I'm going to do something that's big. I know it. And I knew if I didn't give up, eventually that there'd be this breakthrough. And it took, man, probably 2.5 years. But then, I got into that investor market, and the market turned. And that's where, where you said the number of homes between me and my partner, Tyler, and our team that we've sold, there's been over 5,000 homes that we've sold as a team. And that was, a lot of those were the investors. And we just were the first ones that started riding that wave of investors. And so, before I knew it, we were selling several hundred homes a year. And, that was, again, became the number one agent by pushing through that. But there was a couple of rough years in there, man. It's like a hockey stick, it's like nothing happens, and then boom.
Yeah.
It really takes off. And it was real. My story is very non-sexy. But it just was a grind.
But
man.
that's the beauty of it, man.
Yeah.
Like I see people like looking, especially in our day, like you see so many people looking for a quick, get rich on TikTok, on online, and wanting to shortcut the success. I'm like, and not wanting to knock doors, cold call. I'm like, dude, that's the refinement you want. You want hard. There's nothing good. Even if you get a huge paycheck and it's easy, you're not going to appreciate it. And it's the journey and the climb that, is where most of the reward comes from.
Yeah, no, it really is.
Something hard.
It's, you can take a helicopter to the top of a mountain and you're not going to feel very good about it. You hike it because it's because it was so difficult that you appreciate it at the top.
I love that. So there's a lot of things to unpack here in your story, and I want to go to where it transcends. How many people, real quick, like at your real estate company, how many people do you have selling?
Our team is a ninja team, man. I just have specialists, so we're just a couple.
Small,
yeah. So I turned my real estate team over to my business partner Tyler 2 years ago.
Okay.
So I'm still the face of it. We just rented out the water park last week and had 600 of our clients there, and obviously go and support all that. But he does the day to day. But so we have like 3 agents and then like 6 admin that kind of run it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
So unpacking your story here, and then I'm sure there's more you want to talk about, but I've noticed a couple of things like consistency, commitment, belief in yourself. Like I've noticed the same thing, Jimmy, like pulled on a lot of top dogs making well over $500,000 to $1 million in sales. And they always had this belief of investing in themselves. Mm-hmm. Right. And that's something I preach is like, before you invest into real estate, if you're making sub $250,000, don't be talking about real estate investing. Don't be talking about investing. Go invest in you.
Yeah. I mean, people, I get asked, that's probably the number one question I get asked, I have $100,000. What should I invest in? And, I don't know if you just ripped off one of my speeches or something, but I say, if you're not making at least 200, 300,000 a year, just invest all of it in yourself, because you're not making enough money to move the needle. Like, maybe put 10% in the stock market and 10% in crypto or something. But like, ultimately, if you're not making a couple $100,000 a year, you just need to, especially if you're a sales guy. I mean, good
Yeah.
God, like
Yeah, especially.
invest in yourself till you're making 300, 400, 500,000 a year, because your best return on investment is going to be your ability to close more people.
Exactly. Yeah. I love that. What are the things like in that process of investing in yourself did you discover that kind of lit a fire in your butt? For me, one thing I hit on is like just the power of proximity, just getting around higher level people, of seeing what's possible for me and believing like you got around these guys that are doing 30, 40 a month and you're only working this many hours, and you're like, okay, if I do this, I'm going to dial it up.
Yeah. I mean, that first coaching program I did, when I sold 98 homes my second year, I was the number one agent in our office. I think top 2 or 3 in the state. And I thought I was a pretty big deal, 26 years old, I'm sure I was an annoying little sucker around the office, but I got to be a part of this group called the Real Estate Top Producers. A guy named Mike Ferry threw it on, my coach, and he brought the top agents from all over the country that he was coaching, and we'd get together once every 3 months in like Miami or Vegas or something.
Okay.
And we'd spend 2 days just masterminding with each other. And every one of those agents was selling 75 or more homes a year. And I remember, man, sitting there and like I said, dude, I started getting a little bit, confident or a little bit complacent with what I was doing. And I looked to my left, I'm sitting next to the top agent in San Diego. This guy made, 12 million last year selling real estate. He ended up becoming the CEO of Keller Williams, the number one agency in the country, Chris Heller. I was sitting to my right. Guy from Dallas just sold 900 homes last year. And this was before real estate teams were a thing. This is like one dude with like his assistants sold 900 houses, And so I go to that, and all of a sudden I'm like, my goal's not big enough. And all of a sudden the possibility of selling 200 homes a year was a real one, and 500 homes a year was a real one. And so, the first thing is like, we've all heard the story of Roger Bannister and the 4-minute mile, but until something's done, if you're around people that think $100,000 is a lot of money, you're going to start to think $100,000 is a lot of money.
Yeah.
And so ultimately, you just being around people that expand your mind is one of the reasons. But I really believe like what I've done with mentorship and coach, because I've spent over 7 figures on coaching. We were talking before this podcast, I've personally hired Ed Milet to be my one-on-one coach.
Yeah,
I've personally hired
amazing,
Neil Strauss to be my one-on-one coach, Stefanos. These are the top people in their industry, number one, and I've hired all these people because I find people that used to be where I'm at that are now where I want to be.
Yep.
And if I can get around them and suck up enough information, I can compress time, and I can basically take what took them 10 years. I can do it in 1 or 2. And so I just try to find the person that's the best at whatever I'm trying to learn, and I'll go hire them. And, sometimes, if you're listening to this and you're like 20 years old, well, go get their book, or maybe
start there,
start watching their YouTube channel, start commenting on their photos on Instagram, whatever, like just get in their world a little bit.
Yep.
And eventually you get to their mastermind or whatever. And then maybe one day, you become friends with them, or you start coaching with them.
Absolutely. That proximity there's power in that. We were talking about that. That's huge. Dude, I was geeking out on the fact that you're paying Ed Milet. Ed Milet, Tony Robbins, I put at in the stratosphere of like mentorship, Ed, especially in my opinion, just like a well-rounded human being in every way. One thing I want to comment on is this, you see the similar stories with high level sales people, entrepreneurs, same thing in investing and coaching, taking the gamble at some early point. But what's cool is you see it so often where even a decade later, they're still doing it, and they're doing it at a higher level. I love seeing that, you don't just have one coach. You don't just have Ed, you got multiple, dude.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll give you an example. Like last May, I just knew that like there was a piece in relationships that I was missing.
Yeah,
like that was the piece that I just was not figuring out in my life. And, I run a men's coaching group. Like a big part of it is relationships. And so I felt like I'd kind of maxed out my growth as a single man. I was like, I need to figure this out.
Yeah.
And so that's why I hired those coaches that I just mentioned. But I also, Tony Robbins does a relationship thing for his platinum members.
Yeah.
And I wanted to go to it. And so I paid the $100,000 to go to this 7-day course, basically in Maui. And, you spend 60 hours deep diving into this. And it was funny, dude, because I only had to learn one thing. Like I can literally, with my coach Stefanos, again, you pay $50,000 for 6 months of coaching. He said one thing that unlocked something in me that it just changed everything. Same thing with the Tony Robbins event. I learned one thing. I called my best friends when I got home. I'm like, you guys, I think I got it. I'm like this. And I told them what I learned. They're like, wait, yeah, you didn't, like, how did you not know that? And I'm like, I don't know, but that never clicked until I went to that event. It was worth the entire thing just to learn that one thing, because I couldn't get the message any other way. I was, and nobody, he was brilliant enough to deliver it in a way that I just got it.
Dude, but there's something about how, like, when you pay attention, like that principle of like I feel like when you give the money out, like we set aside the ego and we open the doors of, massive humility to a mentor who's ready to give. I think it's a special thing.
Yeah, I mean, look, we just don't value things we don't invest in. We don't like, it's just human nature. And so, if you give somebody something for free, like my original group with We're the They, we had a guy in our group and he was a police officer. So I was trying to help him out. He didn't have the money. So I gifted it to him and he had this giant breakthrough, man, like saved his marriage, all these things. But then he just kind of quit coming. Like he just didn't, it's when you're not paying for something, you just don't value it. Right. Yeah, and so anyway, it's just kind of funny. Like, every single paying member showed up for everything, but you give it to one free one away, they just don't get that value the same way.
Something about like sacrifice and if you can't sacrifice with your money to pay coaches, there's other ways of sacrifice. Go engage, go serve them. I love what you said about go get the books first. Start there.
But, yeah, I mean, like there's no look. We live in 2024. There's no lack of information.
Yeah, it's true.
Like implementation and actually putting it into use is where people fall short.
Yeah,
but like you can find out how to do the thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Dude, what do you suggest for teams? Like we have our team. We coach guys all over the country for sales, but then with our team too, we tell them to hire coaches outside of us, and we're considering even having them pay people within the organization to have a coach because of that principle. We've seen it work so damn well. What's your like advice for companies, like if you're a pest control company, solar, door to door, whatever, or even a car sales team, like what's your advice to create that culture and that buy-in? Maybe if it's not right to like pay a team leader, or do you recommend that they go find a coach outside of the team, or what do you suggest for that?
Yeah, I mean, it just depends. Like you want to have a level of comfortability. What do you need help in? So for a lot of people, what they need is a personal one-on-one coach, somebody that has an unbiased opinion that can coach you. Like if you're asking your sales leader,
he's biased.
You of course, yeah. And so he's the worst person to go to for advice. Yeah. Even your parents are the worst people to go to because they're going to give you information to keep you safe, which is going to hinder you from what going for your dreams. And so, I think everyone should have a one-on-one coach. And that has to be outside of your organization, whatever else. And then it's whatever skill you want to learn. I literally go, what skill do I not have? And I'll go hire the best person to teach it. And so I've done that with 15 different subjects, marketing, social media. Like the day I learned how to do social media, I hired somebody that was amazing at social media and I paid him a lot of money and spent a lot of time on it. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, this actually works now. It works. Yeah. But like, I did not know what I didn't know. Right. And so like podcasting, the 2 weeks after I launched my podcast, I had an opportunity to sit down with Tim Ferriss. He had the #1 podcast in the country at the time. And I sat there for an hour and just picked his brain. I got more information in an hour with Tim Ferriss having brunch than I would have in 10 years trying to figure it out on my own.
You paid him for that lunch?
No, thankfully I had a friend that just connected it.
That's huge.
But, but like sometimes like, yeah, I mean, ideally you don't have to pay for everything, but you do need to have stuff that like, you have to be invested, right? You have to like do the thing. And so like, now, if I had an opportunity to coach with Tim, I probably would have taken the opportunity. I don't think he was offering it, but anyway. And so, but you have to find a one-on-one coach that can give you unbiased opinions and somebody that has experience. Like, one of the things with me, I mean, I started this coaching program that I'm doing when I was 40 years old. I felt unqualified to do it until I was 40 years old. Like I had so many people begging me to coach them before I finally decided to do it because I felt like an imposter, if I'm being honest. I really did. Even when I like, one of my coaches was like, you really need to do coaching. You need to do this. Like you have this, you've gone through this. You've, learned so many things. Like you need to teach other men basically the path you went down. And I just felt like an imposter. I'm like, I'm still single. There's guys in better shape than me. There's guys that are richer than me, guys that are smarter than me. And you're comparing yourself to everybody, right? And so I felt like an imposter, so I didn't do it. And then finally, I was doing a meditation and it came to me. It was like, Jimmy, who reaches out to you? Who actually needs help? And it was like, oh, guys reach out to me and they ask me the same question I was always getting on my Instagram was, how do I find a group of friends like you have? And I was like, oh, the one thing that I really am the best in the world at is helping men connect on a deep level. I know how to do that better than anyone I've ever met. All my friends met through me and I have the greatest friends in the world.
You are a master networker.
So I'm like, oh my gosh, that's my thing. And all of a sudden I went from feeling like an imposter to like, I am the exact guy to do this. And so it completely empowered me and I hit the ground running with full speed. and I could talk to somebody when I'm sitting there with them and they go, dude, should I do this or not? I'm not sure. And I said, dude, I can tell you unapologetically that this is going to change your life. I know it will, because I've seen it happen now with hundreds of other people. And so that conviction, that certainty that I had about my own program is why it was so easy for me to fill it and to sell it, because I truly believed in what I was doing. And nowadays you do get a lot of coaches or people that are trying to, and they really are doing it because they don't want to be on the doors anymore, or they're really doing it because they just don't want to have to do the hard work. They're not qualified to be coaching yet. If somebody's not, I don't even know how old you are, bro, but if somebody's wasn't 30 years old, there's no way in hell I'd hire them to coach me.
Yeah.
You just haven't lived enough life.
Yeah.
Period. And if you haven't lost all your money at least once, I probably wouldn't hire you to coach me on that. If you haven't had your heart broken at least once, I probably wouldn't have you coach me on that. Yeah. If you're set in your ways on something too strictly, I probably wouldn't have you coach me either. But you have to vet people, because like they just haven't had enough life experience, Yeah. I would say now, like, sales is a little bit easier for people to learn. Like, you can, and so I do think, like, when it comes to that, find a killer. You might be 22 and your boss is 24. Just soak up everything you can. That guy can teach you everything you need to know.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I was probably more qualified to teach about real estate sales at 27 than 99% of the people doing it. Right. And so, but find a killer. Like, I remember I was in Arizona like a year ago, and I'll tell a quick story. And there's this kid, he was just begging me on Instagram for my time. And I happened to have something fall through. So I said, dude, if you can be at the Scottsdale Mall or whatever in the next 30 minutes, I'm having lunch, you can join me. So the dude comes over there and we're sitting there meeting, and he's like, dude, you're my guy. I love everything you're doing. He hasn't signed up for anything that I coach, but whatever. And he's like, you're the one I look to for everything I'm doing. He's like, so I started my own men's group and it's not really taken off. And I'm like, well, what do you teach? And he's like, I teach him how to be successful financially, how to build their careers. I'm like, how old are you, bro? He's like 26. I'm like, come on. Okay, hold on a second. Well, I didn't disqualify him yet. I'm like, oh, you must be super special then.
Yeah.
Like, tell me, what have you done? Like, and dude, he was a middle of the road door-to-door guy. Like, wasn't even good at it. He's like, told me how many sales he had. He had like 300 sales in a year. And I was like, please tell me it was either solar or alarms. He's like, no, it's pest control. I'm like, bro, you're not even a good sales guy. Like, and I said this to him because somebody needed to.
Yeah.
I said, dude, if you want to coach people, I go, at least go like, friggin' go climb Everest or something. Do something that makes you at least interesting. Because no offense, bro, I go, you can't get traction because you haven't done shit.
Yeah.
And so, like, nobody should be hiring you. I was like, and he like was pissed, literally left the lunch pissed. I don't even remember his name now, but it's like, the point is like, you can't teach people if you haven't really experienced it at a high level, and now you can study it for a long time. That's why I say they got to be older, because if you study it for 20 years, you can be the best in the world at teaching it. Yeah. But if you haven't, you're just too young before that. And so that's one of the things to look out for a coach. You just want to find people that have really done it. Financial advisors, like, first question you should ask them is, I want to see your portfolio. Yeah. How much money do you have? Let me see where you live. Yep. Like, I need to see your house. It does matter.
For me, show me the your history. Show me the records. Show me the stats.
Yeah. Well, I mean, my first book I wrote, it's called The Next Wave of Influence in Real Estate. And I interviewed the 100 of the top millennial real estate agents in the country. And I asked them the same 7 questions. I kind of copied the model of Tim Ferriss's Tools for Titans. And one of the questions was, what's your real estate portfolio and your investing philosophy around real estate? Dude, these are the 100 top millennial real estate agents in the country. Half of them did not own a real estate property. Half of them didn't own one rental property. They're the top agents in the country. I'm like, of course you're not going to be able to teach people how to invest in real estate. And all these people invest in real estate and they have a bad experience. Well, dude, how many doors did the realtor have that taught it to you? Because it's very particular. Investing is much different than finding a home for your family. And so, I own over 50 doors. Like, I've sold thousands of houses to investors. I lost my ass not knowing what I was doing in 2007, 8, 9. So I became obsessed with learning everything I could about real estate investing. I haven't had a client lose on a real estate deal in 10 years. You know what I mean? Because I know exactly what they should be looking for. 2-3 years ago, when the market started going crazy right after COVID, I was over here like, oh my gosh, like, people are buying the craziest shit. None of this makes sense. And I was like warning people, and they were calling me to buy properties. I'm like, dude, don't buy that. I was trying to talk them out of it. And, I had one buddy, he bought all these townhomes for like 550 grand. I'm like, what are you doing? He was like, well, they're going up 50, 75K by the time they're built. I'm like, until they don't. And sure as shit, the market turned and he got stuck holding them, and he lost about 100 grand on all of them, because he was losing $1,200 a month on the cash flow. And there's just principles that you have to know. And so I think going through that, then really diving in and learning that,
Dude, I love that. I can't agree more with what you're saying about the coaching. Like, if somebody tries to come to me for like relationship expertise, not your guy. You know, if they want to come to me about how to become a multimillionaire through real estate investing, not your guy, not yet. But when it, you know, I think a lot of the problem people have is they just, especially from social media, just impulsive, like, oh, I'm going to hire this person, I'm going to go to this person for this. But I don't know about you, but for me, I've always been very intentional about like, I'm lacking in this area, so I want to invest in this area. Like recently, it's been relationships, kind of like you. And so I'm like, who's the best in the world that I know? Like Tony Robbins and his team. So I'm paying their coaches right now. I just started working with them. And I think if some people can identify what's a skill that I'm lacking, right? And you know, I remember talking to some guy who's making 40,000 from door to door, and he's like talking to me about all this time he's spending on real estate training and learning how to invest in real estate. I'm like, dude, what are you doing? Like, go get more money. Go learn how to get sales to get your income higher. So we're talking about investing, you know, several $100,000 instead of several thousand. You know.
Well, and there's this thing that sales guys do, and this is important for your audience, is like they're very good at being creative at avoiding doing the difficult thing.
Yeah. What?
Like, well, it's because you want to subconsciously, we want to feel like we're being productive. But so if he's studying about real estate, he can convince himself he doesn't need to knock the doors.
Yeah.
If you're doing an ice bath every morning, that feels like you had a productive thing. So you do that in lieu of going and making your calls. Yeah. Like Alex Hormozy is the number one guy to study on all this stuff. He's like there. I say the same thing. Like I had no morning routine. I woke up and within a half hour I was at the office and I was on the phones by 8, no matter what, like period. That was my morning routine. My morning routine was doing my job, you know? I will say like all that other stuff is awesome as a bonus. If that guy was making 400 grand a year, I'd say he's doing an awesome job studying real estate investing, but he's probably doing it to avoid making calls and actually doing the thing that's uncomfortable for him and that he doesn't like doing. And, you know, the best salespeople, they don't work when they feel like it. They work because they have a set schedule. They're consistent. You said that earlier. It's the number one word. It's consistency over time. I'll tell you a quick story about consistency.
Yeah, tell me.
Because
I pound this principle all the
time.
Yeah,
no, I actually had Ed Milet was my keynote speaker at my event in February, and we did a little one-on-one interview on the stage with him afterwards. And he said something that I've been preaching for the last couple of years, but he said the most successful, because he interviews the who's who. I mean, you name it. Yeah. You know, and I've been able to interview some pretty amazing people myself. And we both said that all the most successful people have one thing in common. They're just willing to take action, not knowing if it's going to work. They're just willing to take the action. So number one is just, you have to take action. You have to do the thing that you're avoiding doing. So Chris Williamson was my other speaker that keynoted my event and with the Modern Wisdom podcast. And he said, talking about doing a thing is not doing the thing. Planning to doing the thing is not doing the thing. Right now with you is not doing the thing.
Yeah.
Preparing to do the thing is not doing the thing. The only thing that is doing the thing is doing the thing, right? And so the story I was going to share with consistency is, so I started my podcast almost 8 years ago. And I remember like I was really good at getting influencers and all these different people on right away because I was borrowing their audiences. And it's why my podcast grew pretty quick. But I remember I was about 50 episodes in and we were growing. It was going good. I mean, I'd had on the who's who of Utah, most of the top executives, a lot of the influencers, a lot of the top athletes. Like I was killing it with my podcast, but I had an opportunity to get Mitt Romney on. It was the biggest name to that point. Right. Yeah. And I remember thinking like, oh man, this is going to change everything. Right. And I was so excited, dude. So I do the interview. I remember the day we published it, I like hit send. I'm just waiting for my phone to ring. Dude, I did not get one call. Not one person mentioned it. No one gave a shit that I interviewed Mitt Romney.
How we do that.
And what I realized is my podcast was growing because it was consistency over time. I've now gone almost 8 years. I've never gone a week without putting out a podcast. Not once. Wow. That is why my podcast grows. It's not this big one thing. People that don't have success, they think that they're just like flipped a coin and it landed on the side that they didn't pick. Like there's no success fairy that comes and touches some people. It's literally every person that I know that's great at something is just consistent at doing it every single day over and over. I interviewed a buddy of mine on my podcast the other day. His name's Lowell Crabb. He manages a lot of the wealthy people in Utah's money. And he's my age. And we first became friends. He cold called me. We played college baseball together on a summer league for BYU. And that was the only time, and I only played in like 3 games. I quit. I decided I was done playing baseball, but we played in like 3 games. I probably had the roster, and he just cold called me and see if he could sell me life insurance, man, if he could like manage my money. And I was so appreciative that somebody was doing what I was doing. that I ended up working with him. And anyways, now he manages over $2 billion himself.
Mm.
What is what he manages of people's money. And I was talking to him and I said, dude, if people only knew, it's just, you've been consistent now for 20 years, like 10 years doing something consistently, you're going to be great at it. You're going to have a great career. And anything else that feels like a shortcut is very fleeting. It
Yeah.
builds your ego and not your confidence. And eventually
Mm.
it ends up going away.
It's amazing. Well, what's that quote that we overestimate what we can do in 1 year, we underestimate how much we can do in 10.
Yeah.
That's awesome, Jimmy.
Yeah.
The consistency is huge. We like one of our core values has been like show me, don't tell me. Like results talk louder than your words. I feel like there's so many salespeople that talk a big game, you know, super egotistical with like how good they are at selling their close rate. It's like, dude, nobody cares. Like what you think people care about, nobody cares about. So I love hearing you hit on that.
Yeah. Well, and another point on that real quick. So I interviewed Andy Frisell on my podcast a couple of years ago, and he created 75 Hard. Right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, we know.
And so I talked to him and I said, so tell me about 75 Hard. He said, Jimmy, he said, people have a hard time staying in the present moment. They either live in the past or they live in the future. That's where depression comes from. It's where anxiety comes from.
Yeah.
He said, if you can just be present and win the day, then you're going to have a great life. But you have to stack those winning days over and over. He said, so I created a program. The whole purpose of it is to teach people to win today. And if you win today, if you do those things on a 75 Hard program and you do it every single day for 75 days in a row, then you have a great life. Yeah. And so he said the whole purpose is just to teach people to win the day.
I love that. That's huge on what I've getting around high level entrepreneurs and CEOs, you know, guys like you, Jimmy, you see the same thing where I've noticed this pattern of, hey, they work on themselves. They work on the business to duplicate SOPs, free up time. And then there's time in the business, running meetings, podcasting, sales calls, whatever it is. Right. And we've been very like passionate about creating that environment for salespeople because, you know, either the day runs you or you run the day. And for so many salespeople, they don't know what they're doing. Imagine like going into an entrepreneur with even less training at a younger age. Like you run your own schedule can actually be a curse, you know? And so that's something we hit a lot is like work on yourself every day and with not too far of like, hey, do a 5-hour routine, you know, like what Hormozi says, don't do the plunge. Like don't take it too far because at the end of the day, you still need to put in the work. You need to put in the time. So anyways, I love hearing you talk about these principles, brother. It's awesome.
Yeah. And it sales, it really is easy, guys. It's like, it's, you just learn what to say and then you say it all day.
Yeah.
That's it. Like it's
consistency.
I got to the point in real estate, dude, where you couldn't give me a single objection. I didn't have 3 responses for.
Yeah.
So at that point, the person with the most certainty wins. And so you just keep pushing through. And it's like, and there's no new excuses. It's not like people have a new reason not to buy solar every day. It's the same 5 reasons.
It is.
So get really good at answering why they're not buying the solar from you. And if you have a really great reason, the sales part of it becomes really fun because you just know what to say. Like, why don't guys approach hot girls when they see them? Well, because they don't know what to say. So they're afraid of looking stupid. If they would have literally just learned 10 things of what to say when you talk to a girl, you no longer have approach anxiety. And all of a sudden you have a lot of really pretty dates. Like it's not that difficult of a concept, but if you don't know what to say, your whole world could collapse if you got embarrassed in that moment.
Yeah.
It's really simple. And it's not like, you know, having lines, it's just literally knowing how to have a conversation. Same thing with sales. The best sales reps, they are repeating a specific script, basically almost word for word, but no one would ever know that it's a script. Dude, I did stand-up comedy for a couple of years and I got to watch a lot of these top comedians in the country. They would stumble their words and like make it look like it looked so natural that they were coming up with it on the spot, or they literally had it down to the like how they stumbled or slurred a single word in a sentence. It was like exactly the same, but it looked like they were just coming up with it in the moment every time. And that was part of the brilliance. It's like getting so good at saying it that no one knows that that's what's happening.
Yeah, that is rehearsed or pitched. I love that. Dude, what is the, for somebody that isn't as intense as us, you know, that doesn't have the gift of gab or, you know, maybe struggling with the consistency, or maybe they are consistent, but they're wanting to get to the next level and they're struggling maybe with motivation or, you know, whatever it may be. What is your advice to that rep who's either in a rut, struggling, and wanting to get to the next level?
Well, I think they got to ask themselves what they want. Like for a lot of people, like you might just be in an industry that isn't working for you. Like, do you want to be a killer? Do you want to be a top rep? Like some people are just okay being okay, and that's okay too. But like, if you want to be the top rep, then just ask yourself why you're not. Like if that's your motivation, ask yourself why you're not there. Like, is it a skills problem or is it a motivation problem? Okay. Well, if it's a skills problem, pretty simple. Get better skills. Like, where do you get the better skills at?
Yeah.
Go learn them, right? Hire a company like yours or whoever's the best in the industry at doing it. Go learn the skills. If you have a motivation problem, it's like, okay, well, what would motivate you? Why aren't you motivated? Like, the best people in the world at like whatever they're doing, the Kobe Bryants, the Michael Jordans, I mean, you name famous musicians, all of them, like they had a deep, deep burn. There's a buddy of mine named Ben Newman. He's a close friend of mine. And he talks about the burn. What's your burn? What's your thing, right? That's going to get your ass up when you're not feeling like it. Like, where's that pain, or where's the pleasure that you're seeking or whatever? Like, if you can build a strong enough burn to get you to get up and do the thing, then you can figure out the motivation problem. But, that's really the only two things. And then from there, it's just a habit. And you've probably built bad habits. If you're in a rut, you probably have bad habits. You probably have bad energy. So, okay, how do you improve your habits? Well, you improve your minimum standards. Like, it's pushing through those things you don't want to do. And then again, your energy changes by just focusing on things that, bring you success. Like, the number one thing that I say changes people's lives is literally texting other people a gratitude list every morning. That's probably the number one thing you can do to change your life.
Wow.
That's simple, because the mind is trained to keep us alive, and it's not trained to keep us happy. So unfortunately, it's looking around all day long for what's wrong or what's going wrong or what's missing or what's mistaken. And if you can hijack that by simply having gratitude, because then you're consciously looking for what's going right in your life. And so the only way to overcome our natural animal brain looking for what's going wrong is through gratitude. And gratitude can't coexist with a negative emotion. So the gratitude takes over any of those negative emotions that are existing, and you can live in a beautiful state.
That's amazing. So I've noticed this correlation with some of the most successful people. I've seen humble reps, and then very like strong personality, in a sense, ego reps with the ego, absolutely crush it. But they all have gratitude. They all express massive appreciation for the opportunity, for the training, whatever it is, and they're not too good to report stats, to ask questions, and to seek mentorship. So I think that's huge. So dropping bombs here. I love it, dude. So I'm curious. We got like 3 minutes. What's next for you? Like I want to hear the story from crushing in sales, real estate. Like, how did you come to We Are They? I know we don't have a ton of time, but
yeah. So this is what I've been really focused most of my energy on the last 2.5 years. I sold the most expensive home ever in Utah, coming up on 5 years ago in August. And
what was that at? I have to ask.
It's 32.5 million. It was almost a 7-figure day. Yeah.
Jeez.
And honestly though, it was just very unfulfilling. And if it was like I was the peak. I was number one agent in that year. And I just had this epiphany, man. I knew I had to do something that was going to be more impactful and, and just mean more. And so I started playing with that idea for a few years. And ultimately, like I told you earlier in the podcast, I came up with I realized that, the thing I do best is help men connect. And so I created We Are the They. The name comes from, I used to go undercover with some organizations that would, help out with sex trafficking. Yeah. And after one of the ops, my girlfriend at the time picked me up from the airport, and I was telling her about this op. It was our most dangerous op we ever did. It was a big one. And we, had this big rescue, and I was telling her all about it. And she pulls over and she's like, "Hey, I don't want you to do this anymore. It's like dangerous and it's a bad environment." I'm like, "What are you talking about? You're not just hear my story. We just rescued these kids." Yeah. She's like, "I know, but like, it's just, like, I don't like that you have to go out there and do that." And I was like, "Well, this can be part of my life's mission." And she said, she says, "Well, why can't they just go do it?" And without even thinking, I said, "Well, there is no they. We are the they." And when I said that, I was like, "Oh, damn, that's going to be my new motto for life." Like, people are always complaining that somebody needs to do something. It's like, well, we have to do that. Right. And I just written my previous book before the one I just did. It's all about the hero's journey. Like, no one's coming to save you. We've all heard that, but it's true, man. You can be around the most successful people in the world and you could be drowning. It does not matter. Nobody else can do the work for you. It's one of the gifts we have in this life, is it's up to us. And that's how we get ultimate fulfillment. But anyway, so I named my company We Are the They. And I've had the opportunity to coach almost 400 men now. And we just, it's all about being vulnerable, authentic, and in integrity. We do a lot of high adventure stuff. I took 70 guys to run with the bulls. We swam with, tiger sharks. We've jumped off these giant cliffs. Just do a lot of crazy stuff. I'm taking a big group down to Lake Powell this weekend. Last weekend we went bobsledding. I had Jake Paul's boxing trainer, BJ Flores, come in, and he taught us how to box. And one of the dudes got knocked out. And it feels good to get punched in the face sometimes, But we're always just doing these things that just honestly just feel alive, man. And just, when you can push past the fear of stepping in the boxing ring with your buddy swinging at you, or you can push past the fear of jumping off a giant cliff, then all of a sudden having a tough conversation with your wife isn't as big a deal,
Mm,
or going and knocking doors and being afraid of being rejected, isn't
yeah.
so hard. And so the whole point of the program is to help people push through those fears that hold us back, and then really be able to dive into their bigger fears, which are what's really going on inside that we don't talk about.
Yep.
And we can start to get into that stuff. You can really do a lot of healing.
And that's staying in the present. That's what you're talking about.
Totally.
Going back to that point. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's huge, man. That's something I've been doing lately. It's a game changer. So I feel like a lot of the top people, top reps are in the future. And then the ones who suck at complaining about, depression and anxiety, it's usually, well, anxiety is future, but they're stuck in the past. So it's something powerful. You uncover your demons, but it's actually a beautiful thing if you sit with that. I love that you're doing that. I think you're the king of vulnerability, dude. I love it.
Well,
It's a gift. Men today need that. Men today need it. And so thank you for standing up and doing that, Jamie.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, man. It's when we're vulnerable with other people, the right people, by the way. But when we're
Well
vulnerable
said.
with the right people, we give them the gift of being able to be vulnerable back.
Yeah.
When we always act like we have everything figured out, it's pretty tough to approach us,
Yeah, it is.
And so I think, all I've done is been very open. I talk about stuff all the time on my podcast, in my book. I share some pretty vulnerable stories and some of the times when I dealt with a lot of shame and, feeling like I wasn't good enough and things like that. And how I found the gifts in those, and then how I kind of had this journey to self-love.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's awesome, man. Well, thank you for coming on the show today.
Appreciate you, man. Thanks for having me.
How can people find you?
Best thing is on my Instagram, Mr. Jimmy Rex.
Yeah.
Give me a follow there. I always answer my own DMs, so send me a message if you have. And everything I'm doing, I post through there. I got, when we open my group back up again, I'll post about it there. I do a lot of big events and parties and things like that, so I post it all there. And if you have any questions, reach out. Would love to help.
Love it. Thank you, Jimmy.
All right, man.
Appreciate you coming on.